We've all been taught to look at narcissists as cold, calculating, and immune to guilt. And yes, they are experts at wearing masks. But beneath that carefully crafted armor lies something they rarely, if ever, show: their secret feelings after they hurt someone. Let me be clear, this is not an invitation to feel sorry for them. It's an invitation to understand, not for their sake, but for yours. Understanding helps you release, not return. It helps you detach, not dive back in. And most importantly, it helps you not take their damage personally. Narcissists are master illusionists. They craft their personas like armor, polished, impenetrable, and calculated to evoke admiration, fear, or obedience. Everything they present to the world is designed to protect a fragile inner world they've spent a lifetime hiding. But when they hurt you, especially someone who truly saw them, believed in them, or loved them, they experience something they dread more than anything else: exposure. It's not the kind of exposure you might think. It's not public humiliation or being called out. It's emotional exposure. The kind that happens when, for a fleeting moment, someone sees past the mask and glimpses their insecurity, their fear, their emptiness. And that terrifies them. Because when you saw the truth of their behavior, when you caught the contradiction, when you called out the manipulation, when you didn't react the way they expected, you became a mirror. And that mirror reflected back something they don't want to acknowledge: that the power they think they have is hollow, that the control they crave is brittle, that the persona they cling to is not who they really are. But here's the twist: they don't respond to that exposure with humility. They don't say, "You're right, I went too far." Instead, they get defensive, cold, arrogant, dismissive. Why? Because vulnerability is dangerous to them. It threatens the entire system they've built to survive. So rather than sit with that feeling of being truly seen, they scramble to cover it up with rage, blame, mockery, or silence. They may ghost you, insult you, or accuse you of overreacting, not because they feel nothing, but because they felt too much and it scared them. You became a witness to their wounded self. And narcissists don't want witnesses. They want worshipers, or at least willing participants in their illusion. What they won't tell you is this: after the door closes and the moment passes, a part of them remembers that feeling, the exposed feeling. And though they'll never admit it, it lingers, it festers, it haunts. Because you were one of the few who truly saw them, and they destroyed that connection, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know how to hold it without feeling weak. But let this truth free you. Their exposure is not your responsibility. Their fear of being seen is not your burden. And their choice to react with cruelty instead of courage, that is on them, not you. You didn't break them, you just revealed what was already broken. And that's something they'll never admit, because doing so would mean facing themselves. And that takes a kind of bravery they've spent their whole lives avoiding. At the root of narcissistic behavior isn't confidence, it's shame. A deep, ancient shame that most of them aren't even fully aware of. It's not the kind of guilt that says, "I did something bad." It's the kind of internal voice that screams, "I am bad." But because that voice is too painful, too raw, and far too threatening to their carefully constructed image, they bury it deep. Narcissists grow up in environments where emotions were either weaponized or ignored. Somewhere along the way, they learned that being vulnerable meant being unsafe, that mistakes weren't opportunities to learn, but evidence of worthlessness. So instead of learning to sit with hard feelings, they learned to disown them and project them onto others. When they hurt you, there is often a moment, brief, quiet, and terrifying, where shame tries to rise to the surface. It might come after they scream, ghost, cheat, lie, or twist your words into knots. It might flicker right after they say something they can't take back. For just a heartbeat, something inside them whispers, that wasn't right. That wasn't love. That wasn't strength. But that whisper is dangerous to them, because if they listen to it, if they face the truth of who they've become, it risks crumbling their entire identity. So they slam that door shut fast. Instead of acknowledging shame, they attack, they rationalize, they turn it back on you. You're too sensitive. You made me do it. This is your fault. They project their shame outward because to feel it inward would be too overwhelming. They've never developed the tools to hold themselves accountable with compassion, to admit wrongdoing without falling apart, to say, I hurt you, and that's not okay. So they offload their shame onto others. And if you're someone who loved them, someone who held space for their truth, you're the perfect container for their self-disgust. They don't consciously choose to be cruel. They react from a place of terror, terror of being seen as defective, terror of being unworthy, terror of being left. And yet, what they fear most, they create. But here's what you need to remember. Their shame is not yours to heal. You can't love someone's shame into wholeness if they refuse to acknowledge it. You can't carry their wounds and your own. And you can't twist yourself into emotional origami trying to prove to them that they're worthy of love, especially when they don't believe it themselves. So yes, narcissists feel shame, but they don't understand it. They don't know how to sit with it. And until they do, they will continue to hurt others as a way of escaping themselves. That doesn't make what they did okay. But it does make one thing clear. You were never the cause of their cruelty. You were just the mirror they couldn't face. Control is everything to a narcissist. It's not just about leading a conversation or winning an argument. It's about controlling how you see them, how others perceive them, how the narrative unfolds, and even how you see yourself. Control is their safety blanket. Without it, they feel exposed, powerless, and terrifyingly unanchored. So when they hurt you, whether through manipulation, gaslighting, devaluation, or abandonment, it's not always about inflicting pain. It's often about asserting control. To them, your pain is proof that they still have power over your reality. And when you react, when you beg, cry, explain, or try to make them understand, it reassures them. It says, you still orbit around me. But the moment you stop, the moment you go quiet, reclaim your boundaries, choose dignity over explanation, or leave the dynamic altogether, that's when panic sets in. It's not always dramatic or visible. Sometimes it's subtle, like a sudden text after weeks of silence, or a casual just checking in message out of nowhere. Sometimes it's rage masked as concern, or sweet words laced with guilt tripping. And other times it's a full-blown smear campaign to dismantle your credibility, because if they can't control you anymore, they'll try to control how others see you. Why? Because losing control doesn't just threaten their image, it threatens their identity. Narcissists don't see relationships as mutual connections, they see them as territories. And when you start healing, when your light returns, when your voice no longer trembles, that signals a shift. One they didn't authorize, one they fear. It's not that they're mourning you, they're mourning the loss of dominance over your mind and heart. The panic they feel is less about missing your presence and more about missing the feeling of control your emotional dependence gave them. and they'll do almost anything to regain it, not because they love you, but because they hate losing. What they rarely understand is this: control is not connection. Real love is not about power. It's about presence, trust, and mutual respect. But they don't operate in that world. They operate in survival. And control for them feels like safety, even if it's toxic to everyone around them. So when you stand up, speak clearly, or walk away in silence, they feel panic. But that panic is not your responsibility. That panic is the consequence of the walls they built to keep love out and control in. And while they spiral in fear, you are learning to stand no longer a puppet on their emotional strings, but a person grounded in your own worth. Let them panic. You're reclaiming peace. It might sound surprising, even impossible, that someone who constantly criticizes your sensitivity, mocks your vulnerability, or labels your empathy as weakness secretly envies it. But they do, deeply. Narcissists are not emotionally strong people. They are emotionally armored. There's a difference. They have built walls, not resilience. What looks like confidence is often just avoidance. What feels like boldness is often fear dressed up in control. And what comes across as strength is usually just disconnection from themselves and from others. So when you show up with open-hearted honesty, when you cry without shame, speak your truth gently, or stay soft even after being hurt, they don't know what to do with that. On the surface, they may scoff or roll their eyes. They may tell you you're too emotional or that you overthink everything. But inside, there's discomfort because you have access to something they don't, the courage to feel. You see, emotional strength isn't loud, it's not dominating, it doesn't demand to win. Emotional strength is being able to sit with hard feelings without running from them. It's being able to stay kind without becoming a doormat. It's knowing how to forgive without forgetting who you are. It's the quiet confidence that says, I can love deeply and still choose myself. That kind of strength, it terrifies them. Why? Because it reminds them of what they lost or never had. Somewhere in their past, they learned that emotions were dangerous, that being vulnerable meant being weak, that crying made you pathetic. So they hardened, they adapted, they survived, but they never truly learned how to connect. And then they met you, someone who could feel, express, communicate, and stay whole, someone who didn't need to dominate to feel secure, someone who didn't need to hurt to feel seen. And rather than be inspired, they felt threatened. Because if your way of being is healthy, theirs must be broken. And they can't face that. So instead of embracing your example, they attack it. They try to tear it down, not because they hate you, but because your emotional strength makes them feel less grounded, less whole, less powerful. But here's the secret they'll never tell you. They wish they had your emotional capacity. They just don't know how to access it. They may mimic it, study it, try to perform it, but it doesn't stick because they're too busy protecting their ego to nurture their soul. So they turn envy into sabotage. They might try to make you doubt your instincts. They may ridicule your reactions. They'll do anything to make you question the very qualities they secretly admire. Because as long as you doubt yourself, they don't have to face themselves. But don't you shrink. Because your emotional strength is not a flaw, it's your superpower. It's what allowed you to love even when it wasn't returned. It's what's helping you heal now, It's what will carry you through long after they've moved on to their next illusion. So let them envy your emotional depth. Let them mock what they can't match. Because while they run from feelings, you are learning to rise from them. That's real strength, and it's yours. When a narcissist hurts you, when they insult, manipulate, discard, or betray you, it might look like they walk away unbothered, unapologetic, almost smug. It can feel like your heartbreak doesn't even register with them, like they're somehow immune to remorse or regret. But here's what's happening beneath that cool exterior. They do feel something. It just comes in waves, and it's not what you might expect. The first feeling they experience after hurting you is relief, a kind of emotional exhale. Not because they feel guilty and then free themselves, but because they feel like they've reestablished control. In their world, hurting someone often means they've reset the power dynamic. If you are getting too close, asking too many questions, seeing too much of who they really are, they strike. Not because they're in control, but because they're spiraling inside and don't know how to express it. And in their mind, that moment of cruelty feels like a win. But that relief, it never lasts. Because shortly after comes the one feeling they spend their lives trying to avoid: emptiness. That quiet echo inside where connection should be. That hollowness that no ego boost, attention, or control can truly fill. It creeps in when they're alone, when the phone doesn't ring, when your voice is no longer there to affirm them, forgive them, or remind them of who they could have been if they had only chosen love instead of fear. And that emptiness is unbearable. Because narcissists don't have a stable inner sense of self to return to when things fall apart. They rely on other people's attention, emotions, and reactions to feel real. So once they push you away, especially if you were genuine, loving, and emotionally present, their world feels eerily quiet. And in that silence, they meet the truth. They are alone. Not because people abandon them, but because they sabotage connection before it can ground them. They may not consciously connect the dots. They may not say to themselves, I hurt someone who truly cared for me, and now I feel empty. Instead, they'll blame you, or they'll jump to the next distraction, a new partner, a new high, a new audience to perform for, anything to escape the void. But the more they do this, the deeper the emptiness becomes, because deep down, they know that no amount of control or conquest can replace genuine intimacy. No amount of flattery can substitute for real connection. And no one else's pain can fix their own. So while they might laugh, mock, or pretend they've moved on, they are haunted by the growing void inside. And the cruel irony is this: they're often most empty after hurting the person who made them feel most alive. But they can't admit that, because admitting it would mean facing their own emotional bankruptcy. And that would require vulnerability, a language they never learned or long ago forgot. So let them feel their temporary relief. Let them sit in the silence they created. You don't need to witness their emptiness to validate your worth. Their relief may be fleeting, but your healing will be lasting. Their emptiness may grow, but your self-worth, that's yours to protect, rebuild, and never let anyone take again. There is perhaps no fear greater for a narcissist than the fear of being truly seen. Not admired, not envied, not obeyed, but seen without the mask, without the charm, without the armor. Because being seen means being vulnerable, and vulnerability to them is unbearable. The narcissists spend their lives constructing a carefully curated image, whether it's the successful professional, the selfless martyr, the misunderstood genius, or the seductive lover. Whatever role they play, it's never the whole truth. It's a costume stitched together from insecurity, shame, and the desperate need for control. Underneath that image is a wounded, uncertain, emotionally immature self, one that was likely shaped in childhood by rejection, neglect, or overinflated praise without true connection. That inner self learned very early that being authentic came with risk, that showing weakness led to pain, that being honest meant being hurt. So they adapted. They learned to perform instead of connect, to dominate instead of relate, to deflect instead of reflect. But then someone sees them, you see them, maybe not all at once, but little by little. You notice the cracks in the performance. You hear the pain behind the perfection. You see the child inside the tyrant. You recognize the insecurity behind the arrogance. And whether you meant to or not, your presence became a mirror, reflecting back not just who they pretend to be, but who they really are underneath. And that terrifies them. Because to be truly seen means they can no longer hide. It means their mask is slipping. It means someone knows the truth, and that truth threatens the entire identity they've built to survive. You may think your love would comfort them. You may believe that seeing their pain would soften them, that if you could just show them that you accept all of them, their wounds, their shame, their humanity, they would lean in, open up, heal, but they don't. Instead, they often attack the very person who sees them most clearly. Why? Because being seen triggers their deepest fear, rejection in their rawest form. They believe that if someone truly sees all of them, their flaws, their fears, their failures, they will be abandoned, not loved. So they preempt the pain. They hurt you before you can leave. They shame you for noticing the truth. They push you away to avoid being pulled apart. They may call you crazy, too emotional, too intense, not because it's true, but because your clarity exposes their confusion. Your depth reveals their emptiness. Your truth threatens their illusion. It's not personal, but it's profoundly painful, because all you wanted was to love them, and all they feared was being loved for who they are. They don't know how to receive that love, not when they haven't learned how to give it to themselves, not when their identity is so entangled with performance, manipulation, and denial. And so they hide again, behind blame, behind silence, behind charm, behind rage. But no matter what they project, they remember being seen. That moment lingers, because whether they admit it or not, they felt it. And it shook something in them. But growth requires facing yourself. And that's a journey many narcissists simply aren't ready for. So don't blame yourself if they couldn't meet you in that space. Don't shrink your light because it made them uncomfortable. And don't regret the fact that you saw someone clearly. That clarity is your gift, not your curse. Let them fear being seen. You are learning to see yourself clearly, fully, and without shame. And that is where real freedom begins. You came here wondering what narcissists feel after they hurt you, whether they regret it, whether it touched them the way it shattered you. And the truth is, they do feel something, but not in the way you hope, and not in the way you deserve. They feel exposed, but they won't admit it. They feel shame, but they can't understand it. They panic when they lose control, but they'll never show it. They envy your emotional strength, yet call it weakness. They feel a hollow emptiness after the chaos, but rush to fill it with more destruction. And beneath it all, they fear being truly seen, because they believe that if anyone ever saw their full truth, they'd never be loved again. But none of that pain, none of that fear, and none of those secret feelings justify what they did to you. You are not here to carry their shame. You are not here to absorb their wounds. You are not here to prove your worth to someone committed to misunderstanding it. Their feelings are not your responsibility. Their confusion is not your closure. Their pain is not your path. Your role now is not to chase their conscience, but to return to your own soul, to remember who you were before they convinced you to question your light, to reclaim your emotional depth as a strength, not a flaw, and to walk away not because you don't care, but because you finally learned to care for yourself. You wanted them to feel something, they may do, but that's their burden to bear. Yours is to heal, and you will.